My name is Dana Fletcher. I'm 38. And last Sunday, my sister shoved me off my chair at family dinner. She didn't do it in private. She did it in front of our mother, our Aunt Ruth, and two of her girlfriends. Right there in the dining room of a house I'd been paying for every single month for 5 years. I hit the floor and the whole table laughed. Not a cruel laugh exactly, more like the kind of laugh people save for someone they've already decided doesn't matter. I looked up at my sister from the cold tell my father laid 20 years ago and I smiled. "Enjoy this dinner," I said. "It's your last free one." I stood up, pulled out my phone. One tap. By morning, 73 missed calls. Before I tell you what that tap did, please take a moment to like and subscribe and drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love knowing where you're listening from. Now, let me take you back 5 years to the week I signed my name on a mortgage that wasn't mine. My father died on a Wednesday in October. Heart attack at 62, halfway through mowing the back lawn. By the time the ambulance got there, the mower was still running. He left behind a wife, 2 daughters, a ranch house with a wraparound porch, and a mortgage with $187,000 still on it. My mother, Lorraine, was 61. She had Social Security and a part-time job greeting customers at a home goods store 3 mornings a week. The bank looked at her application to refinance a loan and didn't even bother with a counter offer. She simply didn't qualify. My sister Carla, 4 years older in the middle of a divorce that had already wrecked her credit, wasn't an option either. That left me. I was 33, working as a court clerk at the county courthouse. Steady income, no debt, credit score of 738. Not glamorous numbers, but clean ones, the kind of numbers a mortgage lender will shake hands with. So on a Tuesday afternoon, I drove to a small office on King Street that smelled like cold coffee and paper cups and carpet cleaner. I sat next to Tommy Mother. She had a tissue balled up in one hand and a pen in the other. I picked up my own pen, a cheap ballpoint that scratched against the carbon paper like it was trying to warn me. I signed as co-signer. My mother squeezed my hand hard enough to leave a mark. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Dana," she said. "We'll split the payments, I promise." I believed her, not because I was naive. I'd spent 4 years watching families make promises in courtrooms and break them in parking lots. I believed her because she was my mother and her eyes were red, and my father's lawn mower was still sitting in the garage with half a tank of gas. The monthly payment was $3,800. My mother's share was supposed to be half. For the first 3 months, she sent checks. Then it was every other month, then quarterly, then not at all. I never stopped paying. 5 years later, I'd put $228,000 into a house I didn't live in. I hadn't done the math until recently. I wish I'd done it sooner. 5 years later, I found out what my mother meant by, "I don't know what I'd do without you." She meant it literally. A year after I signed that mortgage, my sister's divorce finalized. Neil Briggs got the condo, the Audi, and joint custody of their daughter. Carla got her maiden name back and 3 suitcases. She moved home on a Saturday. I remember because I was dropping off my mother's blood pressure medication and found the front porch buried under cardboard boxes. Packing tape had been ripped in long strips and stuck to the railing like party streamers nobody wanted. "It's temporary," Carla told me in the hallway. Her perfume so thick I could taste it. Something floral and aggressive that clung to the walls for days. Just until I figure out my next move. She figured out her next move quickly. Within a week, she'd rearranged the living room furniture, claimed the master bathroom shelf, and started hosting friends for wine on Thursday nights. Within a month, she was setting the weekly dinner menu and telling our mother which groceries to buy. I brought it up carefully. Maybe Carla could chip in a few hundred a month toward the mortgage since she's living there. My mother looked at me like I'd suggested selling the family dog. "Your sister is going through the hardest time of her life, Dana. Don't you dare add to it." Carla was watching TV in the next room. She heard every word. She didn't come out. She didn't need to. Our mother had handled it for her. I drove home that night to my studio apartment, 480 square feet, on the third floor of a building with an elevator that worked every other Tuesday. I sat on my bed, which was also my couch, and I transferred $3,800 to the mortgage lender. Same as last month, same as every month. Carla's contribution that month, 0. Lorraine's contribution that month, 0. About 3 weeks later, I stopped by unannounced to pick up a winter coat I'd left in the hall closet. My old bedroom, the room where I'd done homework, taped posters to the walls, cried through my first breakup, had a new door handle. Carla had moved into it. Bigger closet, she said. Better light. She didn't ask. That was 4 years ago. She never left. And the word temporary was never mentioned again. Let me tell you what $3,800 a month looks like when you make $48,000 a year. It looks like a studio apartment with a window that faces a parking garage. It looks like a 2011 sedan with a check engine light you learn to ignore. It looks like packing lunch in the same 3 containers every Monday through Friday. Rice, beans, whatever vegetables were on sale. It looks like skipping coffee shops entirely. Not as a lifestyle choice, but as a mathematical certainty. After taxes, I brought home about $3,200 a month. The mortgage was $3,800. You can see the problem. I picked up part-time data entry work, 3 evenings a week in a windowless room on the 4th floor of an insurance company downtown. Fluorescent lights that buzzed at a pitch just low enough to be maddening. A keyboard that had been cleaned exactly never. I typed claims from 7 to 11, drove home, set my alarm for 6, and did it all again. My coworker, Margaret Webb, noticed before anyone else. Margaret was a paralegal at the courthouse, 41, sharp jaw, sharper mouth, the kind of woman who could silence a room by raising one eyebrow. She sat 2 desks over and had been watching me bring the same brown bag lunch for 3 years. One Thursday, she set a coffee on my desk. "You never buy coffee," she said. "I like what I make at home." "You drink hot water with a used tea bag, Dana. I've seen it. I didn't say anything. How much?" she asked. And because Margaret was Margot, because she asked it the same way she'd asked the time. No drama, no pity. I told her $3,800 a month for the house. She stared at me. "You're paying almost $4,000 a month for a house you don't even live in. It's my mother's house." Margaret picked up her coffee, took a long sip, and set it back down. She didn't hug me. She didn't lecture me. She just sat with that fact for a moment, the way you sit with a jury verdict you already saw coming. "Okay," she said finally, and then she went back to her desk. That silence said more than any advice column ever could. I ate my rice and beans that night and stared at the wall and tried to remember the last time someone had looked at me like I deserved better. Every family has its rituals. Ours was Sunday dinner. Every week I drove 35 minutes from my apartment to my mother's house. My father's house, really, though we'd stopped calling it that. I brought whatever Carla assigned me, usually drinks, sometimes napkins, once a bag office, always the cheapest items on the list. I never questioned the assignment. I should have. The seating arrangement told the real story. Carla sat at the head of the table, my father's chair, the one with the armrests and the slightly higher back. She'd claimed it the first Sunday after moving in, and no one challenged her. My mother sat to Carla's right, close enough to pass dishes without reaching. I sat at the opposite end near the kitchen door, where the draft from the old weather stripping made my ankles cold from November through March. Conversation orbited Carla like she was the sun. Carla's been looking at job postings. She hadn't opened a laptop in weeks. Carla needs time to heal, 4 years of healing and counting. Carla made this beautiful casserole. My mother beamed. The casserole was from a box. I listened. I chewed. I smiled at the right moments. One Sunday in March, I mentioned the roof. A section over the back bedroom had started leaking. I'd noticed the stain on the ceiling when E used the bathroom. A contractor I'd called quoted $4,200. "We should probably talk about how to cover that," I said. Carla didn't look up from her plate. "That's your department." My mother nodded the way she nods when Carla settles something. Case closed. My department. $4,200. More dollars from the woman who already paid $3,000. $800 a month from the woman who packed rice and beans 5 nights a week. My department. I excused myself to clear my plate. Standing at the kitchen sink, I noticed my mother's credit card statement stuck to the fridge with a magnet. I wasn't snooping. It was right there, pinned next to a coupon for laundry detergent. 3 charges from the same online clothing retailer. All in the last week, all under Carla's name. I washed my plate, dried it, put it back in the cabinet, drove home. I paid for the roof repair the following Tuesday. Nobody said thank you. Nobody said anything at all. I turned 38 on a Thursday, not a milestone birthday. No banners, no surprise parties, no obligation for anyone to remember but people usualito. My phone stayed quiet all morning. No call from my mother, no text from Carla. By noon, I'd checked it twice, then put it face down on my desk and told myself it didn't matter. Margaret appeared at 2:15 with a single cupcake from the bakery on Broad Street, chocolate with a wax candle on top shaped like the number 8. They were out of 3s, she said. So you're 8 today. Congratulations on 2nd grade. I laughed, really laughed for the first time in weeks. Then I went to the restroom, locked the stall, and cried for 4 minutes with the handdryer running so nobody could hear. That same week, Carla posted photos on Instagram. A dozen pictures from a girls' night at the house. 15 guests, string lights on the porch. My mother's good china, the set with the blue rim that only came out for holidays, wine glasses everywhere, Carla in the center of every shot, glowing. I sat in my car outside my apartment at 11:00 at night. Rain running down the windshield in crooked lines. An orange street light turning everything the color of old rust. I scrolled through every photo. 15 people in a house I kept alive with half my income. A party I wasn't invited to. On the week of my birthday, nobody remembered. And for the first time in 5 years, the thought arrived fully formed. What if I just stopped paying? I sat with that thought the way you sit with a match you've just struck, carefully aware of what it could burn, but I knew the math. My name was on that mortgage. If I stopped paying, the bank wouldn't call Carla. They'd call me. My credit score would crater. My ability to ever buy my own home, already a fantasy, would evaporate entirely. I was trapped. The co-signature was a lock and the key was on the other side of the door. At 2 a.m, I opened my laptop and typed 4 words into the search bar. Co-signer writes mortgage law. The results were dense. Legal language, case, state. But buried in the 3rd article, one phrase jumped out. Equitable lien. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I copied it into my notes and closed the laptop. The match was still burning. I spent the next 2 weeks reading mortgage law during my lunch breaks. Not casually, methodically, the way I process case files at the courthouse. Highlighter in hand, legal database on my screen, a yellow notepad filling with terms I cross-referenced against South Carolina property statutes. Here's what I learned. A cosigner who makes 100% of the mortgage payments over an extended period may have grounds to claim equitable lien on the property. Meaning the law might recognize that I had earned a financial stake in that house, not through a deed with my name on it, through 5 years of payments nobody else made. I also learned about partition actions. If a co-owner or equitable stakeholder wants out, they can petition the court to force a sale and divide the proceeds. It's not pretty. It's not fast, but it's legal. The elevator at the courthouse dinged behind me as I read. The hallway smelled like old paper and floor wax and somebody's reheated soup. Normal sounds, normal smells. On a day when everything inside me was rearranging, Margaret caught me one afternoon, 2 tabs of South Carolina property code open next to my case scheduling software. "You're reading mortgage law on your lunch break," she said. Not a question, just curious. That's how it starts. She leaned against the filing cabinet. First it's curiosity, then it's phone calls, then it's your life back. I didn't respond. "Dana, how long have I known you?" 2.5 years, 2.5 years. Dana, same lunch, same car, same 3 blazers, and every month $3,800 leaves your account. It goes to a house where your sister throws parties you're not invited to. I turned off the screen. That evening I did something I should have done years earlier. I opened my banking app and scrolled back month by month, payment by payment. 60 transactions, 60 identical transfers. I screenshot every single one and saved them in a folder on my desktop. I named it House Payments and then changed it to just Payments, and then after a long moment changed it to Evidence. $228,000. I stared at the total for a long time. It was more money than I had ever seen in one place, and not a dollar of it was sitting in my own account. The following Sunday, Carla had a guest at dinner, a woman named Diane, new friend, real estate background, manicure that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. She sat next to Carla and laughed at all the right moments, which I suppose is what friends are for. Carla made introductions around the table the way a hostess introduces staff. This is Mom. She's the heart of the house. Lorraine blushed. And this is my little sister, Dana. She works at the courthouse filing papers. I didn't file papers. I managed case scheduling for 3 judges, coordinated hearing calendars across departments, and processed motions that Carla couldn't have spelled on her best day. But correcting her would have required energy. I was saving for something else. "Oh, do you enjoy it?" Diane asked. The kind of polite question people ask when they can't think of a real one. I opened my mouth. Carla got there first. She doesn't really have options. Some of us are just meant for support roles. She said it while refilling her wine glass, a bottle that cost $30 sitting on a table that existed because of my bank transfers. The fork in my hand went very still. Lorraine let out a small laugh, the nervous kind meant to smooth things over. She didn't correct Carla. She didn't look at me. She reached for the bread basket instead. Diane glanced at me. A quick, uncomfortable look, the kind strangers give when they've accidentally walked into someone else's argument. She didn't say anything during dinner. I ate. I chewed slowly and tasted nothing. I watched Carla hold court at my father's table in my father's chair, and I thought, she actually believes what she just said. This isn't performance. She has genuinely decided I am less than her. After dinner, I was rinsing plates when Diane appeared beside me at the sink. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "I think court work sounds fascinating." She dried a plate, set it on the stack, and walked back to the living room, a small kindness from a total stranger. It shouldn't have mattered as much as it did. I sat in my car for 20 minutes before driving home. I wasn't crying. I was doing math. Specifically, I was calculating how many of Carla's wine bottles my monthly payment could buy. The answer was 126. I almost laughed. What happened next changed everything. And it happened by accident. A Tuesday in April. I stopped by the house midday to drop off my mother's thyroid medication. The pharmacy was near the courthouse, and it saved her a trip. Lorraine was out at a doctor's appointment. Carla's car was in the driveway, but the house felt empty, music playing faintly upstairs. I left the medication on the kitchen counter and turned to go. That's when I saw the envelope. It was sitting next to the fruit bowl. A Venmo confirmation statement, the kind they mail when you request paper records. Addressed to Carla Fletcher Briggs. I wouldn't have looked twice except the amount was printed on the front in that little cellophane window. $600. The sender's note was visible, too. March rent. T. Ramos. I stopped moving. March rent. I walked to the hallway. My old bedroom, the one Carla had claimed 4 years ago, had a new deadbolt on the door. I hadn't noticed it before because I hadn't been down that hallway in months. But there it was, brass and shiny, the kind you buy at a hardware store for $15. And on the floor outside the door, a pair of men's work boots, size 11, not Carla's. She was renting out my old room. In the house, I paid $3,800 a month to keep. She was collecting $600 from a tenant and pocketing every cent. I stood in that hallway and breathed in the smell of cheap lavender air freshener, not the smell of my childhood bedroom, the smell of someone else's rented space. My hands were shaking, not from sadness, from something colder and more precise. I pulled out my phone, centered the envelope in the frame, and took a photo. Then I took 3 more. The deadbolt, the boots. The Venmo statement up close. I checked each image for clarity, tilted the phone to reduce glare, and retook the one that was slightly blurred. The way you handle evidence, because that's exactly what it was. I put my phone back in my pocket, left the medication on the counter, and walked out the front door. The screen door closed behind me with a wooden slap, $600 a month, for my old room in a house I was paying $3,800 to keep. I drove back to the courthouse and didn't eat lunch. I told Margaret the next day. We sat on the iron bench in the small courtyard behind the courthouse, the one with the broken fountain that hadn't run water since the last renovation and the mockingbird that lived in the crepe myrtle and sang like it owned the county. I showed her the photos. She held my phone at arm's length. She needed reading glasses but refused to admit it and scrolled through each image without speaking. 10 seconds. 20. The mockingbird filled the silence. Then she handed my phone back. "She's renting out your room," Margaret said, "in your house and pocketing it. Technically, it's my mother's house. You've put $228,000 into it, more than your mother paid since your dad died, more than Carla's put into anything." She paused. "This isn't about family anymore, Dana. This is somebody stealing from you." The word stealing sat between us on that bench like a brick. I'd spent 5 years calling it sacrifice, calling it duty, calling it family. Margaret called it what it was in 4 syllables. She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card, cream-old embossed, no-nonsense font. "Patricia Holloway, attorney at law, real estate and family property. I've been carrying this for 3 months," Margaret said, "waiting for you to be ready." 3 months? You think I watched you eat rice and beans for 3 years without doing research? She set the card on the bench between us. "Call her this week. Not next month. This week." I picked up the card. It was warm from being in her bag. I ran my thumb across the raised letters and put it in my pocket. "I'll think about it. You'll call her." The noon sun was bright on the bench. The kind of Carolina light that makes everything look overexposed, like a photograph left too long in a window. Margaret didn't hug me. She didn't deliver a speech. She just sat there steady as a courthouse column and waited for me to finish pretending I had a choice. I called Patricia Holloway the following Monday, not because Margaret pushed me. She didn't mention it again. I called because on Sunday night, Carla texted the family group chat, thinking about getting the living room repainted. "What color do we think?" Our mother replied with 3 heart emojis. I replied with nothing. I dialed Patricia's number instead. I decided to try one more time before lawyers got involved. Call it stubbornness. Call it hope. Call it the part of me that still believed my mother would choose fairness if someone just laid the facts on the table. Sunday dinner, pot roast, the heavy kind that makes the whole house smell like onions and bay leaves. I waited until everyone had food on their plates. Then I set my fork down. "I was thinking," I said, keeping my voice steady, "that we should talk about the house expenses. Maybe figure out a way to split things more evenly." 3 seconds of silence. The wall clock my father had hung 30 years ago ticked loud enough to hear from the kitchen. Carla spoke first. "Are you seriously bringing up money at Sunday dinner? It's not about money, it's about fairness." "Fairness?" Carla set her wine glass down. "I cook, I clean, I take care of Mom. You sit in your apartment and write checks. Those checks keep this house standing." "Carla." My mother's hand went to her chest. Here it comes, I thought. The performance. Dana. Lorraine's voice trembled perfectly. "Your father would be disappointed. Family doesn't count pennies. It's not pennies, Mom. It's $3,800 a month." The clock ticked. Carla leaned forward. "What about everything I do here? A living caregiver costs $50,000 a year." I looked it up. She hadn't looked anything up. I knew it the way I know when a witness is improvising on the stand. The details get too round, too convenient. 50,000. A clean, rehearsed number. "You could contribute even a few hundred," I started. My mother began to cry. Tears pressed tissue, the whole liturgy. "Why do you want to tear this family apart? Your father built this and you'd throw it away." Carla reached over and squeezed Lorraine's hand. United front practiced. Maybe not deliberately, but perfected through years of repetition. I looked at them, my mother and my sister, shoulder to shoulder, wiping tears from cheeks that had never felt the weight of a $3,800 transfer. I picked up my fork. I ate 3 more bites of pot roast I couldn't taste. I washed my plate. I drove home. And at 8 the next morning, I called Patricia Holloway and said, "How soon can I come in?" Patricia Holloway's office was on the second floor of a narrow building downtown, wedged between a tailor and an accountant. The waiting room had 2 leather chairs that had been there longer than I'd been alive, and a window that looked out onto a church steeple. Patricia herself was 55, silver-haired direct. She wore no jewelry except a watch, and she didn't offer small talk. I liked her immediately. I handed her the folder I'd prepared, 60 months of bank statements, the co-signer agreement, property records, and the photographs from Carla's rental arrangement. She put on her reading glasses and went through every page. Her pen, a heavy fountain pen with a black barrel, underlined 3 things and circled 2. "You've paid 100% of the mortgage for 5 years," she said. "Not a question. Yes, you don't live in the house. No. And your sister has been collecting rent from a subtenant without your knowledge or consent. That's correct." Patricia took off her glasses and looked at me. "Ms. Fletcher, you have a strong case." South Carolina recognizes equitable liens. A cosigner who pays everything can claim equity even without being on the deed. She laid out 3 options. Demand that Lorraine refinance the mortgage without me within a set deadline. And if she didn't qualify, which Patricia suspected she wouldn't, the property would need to be sold. File a partition action to force a sale through the court or negotiate an out-of-court buyout. "What do you recommend?" I asked. "Start with the demand letter. Give her 90 days. It's generous and it's defensible. I thought about my mother crying at Sunday dinner. Will my credit be affected if I stop paying? If they miss payments after you stop, yes, possibly 40 to 60 points. She paused. But if you keep paying, you'll never get free. That's the trade. I sat with that for a moment. The leather chair creaked beneath me. Somewhere outside, a church bell rang. "I've spent 5 years losing myself $40 at a time," I said. "I think I can survive losing 40 credit points to get me back." Patricia almost smiled. "Generosity has a shelf life, Miss Fletcher. Yours expired about 48 months ago." She capped her pen. I signed the retainer. The church bell rang twice more and I walked out into the sun. I spent the next week building something on my phone that I hoped I'd never have to use. An email drafted and redrafted, stripped of emotion, loaded with facts. 3 paragraphs and 2 attachments. That first attachment, a PDF summary of 60 months of mortgage payments, dates, amounts, confirmation numbers. The second, the Venmo statement photograph from Carla's rental income. The body of the email was simple, effective immediately. "I am discontinuing all mortgage payments on the property at the family address. Enclosed is a summary of 60 payments totaling $228,000 made solely by me over the past 5 years. My attorney, Patricia Holloway, will be in contact regarding my equitable interest in the property. I am requesting that the mortgage be refinanced without my name within 30 days, or I will initiate formal proceedings." I read it 11 times, revised it twice. Patricia reviewed the language and approved it. I saved it as a draft and left it there loaded like a round in a chamber. The plan was methodical. Patricia would send the formal demand letter by certified mail. The email was a backup, personal, direct for the family group chat. I wanted Lorraine to hear it from a lawyer's letterhead first. That was the professional way. Sunday came, I drove to dinner. I brought cornbread, a recipe of my father's that I baked every few months. The one made with buttermilk and honey in a cast iron skillet. I sat at my usual end of the table. I smiled at the right moments. I ate slowly. Carla glanced at me twice during the meal. "You seem different lately," she said. "Quiet, just tired." My mother tilted her head with a concern so perfectly timed it might have been genuine. "See, she works too hard. We need to be gentle with Dana." Gentle. My mother used the word gentle while I held a draft email on my phone that would dismantle the arrangement keeping her housed. I almost laughed. Almost. Apple pie for dessert, my mother's recipe, the crust a little too thick, the way it always was, the way my father used to tease her about. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and butter, and the radio played something soft from another decade. Everything felt warm. Everything felt false. I had the email ready. The lawyer had the papers ready. I had 30 days on the calendar. What I didn't have was one more Sunday. All right, let me pause here for a second. I know some of you are sitting there thinking, just stop paying and walk away, Dana. I thought about it too every single month. But when your name's on that mortgage, walking away doesn't hurt them. It hurts you, your credit, your future, your options. If you've ever been stuck doing the right thing while everyone around you did nothing, drop a comment. I'd love to know I'm not the only one. Now back to that last Sunday. The plan was 30 days. Certified letter first, then the email if needed, then legal proceedings. Orderly, professional, patient. But patience has a way of expiring when new information arrives. On a Tuesday evening, my phone buzzed with a Facebook message from a name I hadn't seen in years. Neil Briggs, Carla's ex-husband. The message was short, no pleasantries. Dana heard Carla's renting a room at your mom's. Thought you should know something. When she filed to lower my child support, she told the court, 0 income, 0. Collecting rent changes that. It's a misrepresentation in a sworn filing. Do with that what you will. I read it 3 times. The blue light of my phone screen was the only light in my apartment. Carla had stood in front of a family court judge, raised her hand, and declared under oath that she had no income while collecting $600 a month in rent from a room in a house I was paying for. In my line of work, I'd seen people face sanctions for less. I'd processed the paperwork myself. I didn't feel anger. I felt the cool click of a puzzle piece falling into place. This wasn't about one lie or two. It was a pattern, a system of small frauds built on the assumption that nobody was checking. I thanked Neil one sentence. I appreciate you letting me know. I didn't ask for details. I didn't commiserate. Court clerks learn early that the less you say, the less gets used against you later. Then I called Patricia Holloway. Forget 30 days, I said. How fast can we move? A pause. I heard her pen tap against her desk. That heavy fountain pen, deliberate as a metronome. How fast do you want before next Sunday? Another pause, shorter this time. I can have the demand letter finalized by Thursday. Courier delivery Friday. And if I want to send the email myself at the same time, that's your prerogative. The letter sets the legal timeline. The email is personal. No restriction on timing. Another tap. Is something happening Sunday? Dinner? I said family dinner. Ah, Patricia's voice carried the smallest note of understanding. Then I suggest you eat light. These things tend to kill the appetite. I almost smiled. I set my alarm for 6 and went to bed. Thursday morning, I sat in Patricia's office and watched her assemble the final package. The demand letter, 2 pages, registered mail, addressed to Lorraine Fletcher, tone firm, language precise. It requested refinancing of the mortgage without Dana Fletcher as co-signer within 30 calendar days. It referenced the 60 payments totaling $228,000. It noted that failure to comply would result in the filing of an equitable lien action and potentially a partition suit requiring the sale of the property. The summary of payments, 14 pages, every month, every transfer, every confirmation number. Patricia's assistant had organized them chronologically with headers for each year. 5 years reduced to a spreadsheet that could be read in 10 minutes and felt in the stomach for much longer. The Venmo photograph included as an exhibit, evidence that a third party had been paying rent to a household member who contributed nothing toward the mortgage. Patricia slid the folder across her desk. I opened it and paged through slowly. Is this everything? I asked. Everything except one question. She folded her hands. Your credit will take a hit after you stop. 40 points, maybe more, depends how long it takes. I know that number took you years to build. I know that too, and you're comfortable. I looked at the folder. 60 pages of my own generosity, itemized, totaled, reduced to legal exhibits. It looked like a court filing. It felt like 5 years of my life pressed flat between card stock. Half my income goes to that house, Patricia. My sister calls me the help. I eat rice 5 nights a week. My car has 190,000 miles. I don't own a dishwasher. I closed the folder. Comfortable. I haven't been comfortable in 5 years, but I'm done pretending that's okay. The printer behind Patricia hummed as it produced the final copy's warm pages, fresh ink, the mechanical smell of toner. She placed them in a manila envelope and wrote the delivery address in her careful handwriting. Friday courier, she said. Your mother will have it by noon. Hold the courier until Monday, I said. Patricia raised an eyebrow. I want to be there when it lands after Sunday dinner. She capped her pen and nodded. Then I'll see you next week, Miss Fletcher. I took the folder and walked out into a Thursday afternoon that felt for the first time in years like it belonged to me. Saturday night, the last Saturday night before everything. I sat on my apartment balcony, a concrete slab barely wide enough for a folding chair and a coffee mug, and watched the sky turn the color of a bruised peach over the rooftops. Crickets had started up in the bushes below, and somewhere down the block, the honeysuckle was so thick you could smell it 3 stories up. May in South Carolina, the air holds everything. I scrolled through old photos on my phone. My father in the backyard, one hand on the grill, the other holding a beer he'd never finish because he always got distracted by something that needed fixing. My mother, 20 years younger, laughing with her head tilted back. A version of herself I barely recognized. Carla and me as kids, 8 and 12. On the front porch, Carla braiding my hair while I held a popsicle in each hand. One for me, one for her. I lingered on that one. I didn't hate my sister. I wanted to. It would have made everything simpler. Hatred is clean and decisive. What Eiffel was muddier than that? I felt sorry for her. I felt exhausted by her. I felt the weight of every casserole she presented as her own. Every comment she made to shrink me in front of strangers. Every dollar she pocketed from my old room while I ate rice at a desk in a windowless insurance office. But I also remembered the girl who braided my hair. I opened the email draft one more time, read every line, checked the attachments. My finger hovered over the send button the way you hover over a light switch in a room you've lived in too long. You know it's time to turn it off. You just want one more second in the familiar dark. I didn't send it. Not yet. I wanted to be in the room when they read it. I wanted to see my sister's face when the math finally arrived at her table. I set my phone down, went inside, brushed my teeth, got into bed. I slept 7 hours straight. No alarm. When I woke up, the sun was already warming the kitchen floor. And for the first time in 5 years, Sunday didn't feel like an obligation. It felt like a destination. I put on a blouse I hadn't worn in a year for no particular reason. I just opened my closet and reached past the usual rotation. Pale blue ironed. It fit well. I baked the cornbread early. My father's recipe. Buttermilk. Stone ground meal from the mill in Somerville. A tablespoon of honey stirred in right before the batter hit the cast iron skillet. The apartment smelled like Sunday mornings when I was 10. Before the mortgage, before the math, I wrapped the skillet in a towel, set it on the passenger seat, and drove. The route to my mother's house passed the courthouse. I'd made that drive so many times I could do it by feel. The dip in the road past the pharmacy, the right turn where the oak tree's roots had buckled the sidewalk, the railroad crossing that shuddered the steering wheel. On Sundays, the courthouse was empty. No attorneys, no clerks, no families sitting in hallways waiting for verdicts that would rearrange their lives. I'd processed hundreds of those families, property disputes, custody hearings, partition actions. I always thought it was sad. Families who couldn't solve their own problems, who needed a judge to tell them what was fair. I never thought I'd be one of them. The last stretch of road curved along the river, past marsh grass and egrets and a boat ramp where teenagers fished on weekday afternoons. I cracked the window. The air smelled like salt and pluff mud, the low-country smell I'd grown up with, the one that means home even when home ist place hurting you, jazz on the radio, something with a trumpet, mournful and slow, the kind of music that sounds better when you're driving towards something you can't take back. I pulled into my mother's driveway at 4:15. Carla's car was already there. 2 other cars I didn't recognize, her friends. Aunt Ruth's sedan parked under the crepe myrtle. Carla opened the front door before I reached the porch. "You're late." I held the cornbread in both hands, warm through the towel, the last thing I would carry into this house without an invoice attached. "I'm right on time," I said. She blinked just once, a micro-expression I wouldn't have caught if I hadn't been looking for it. Then she stepped aside and let me in. The table was set for 7. Carla at the head as always, Lorraine to her right, Aunt Ruth beside Lorraine. Carla's two friends, a woman named Gail and the Diane I'd met before. Across from them, a seat at the far end from me near the kitchen door and the draft, dinner was roast chicken. My mother's recipe, though Carla served it as if she'd invented the concept of poultry. There was wine, 2 bottles, the kind with a cork instead of a screw cap, the kind I couldn't afford and hadn't purchased. I ate quietly. I listened. The conversation circled Carla's plans as it always did. Tonight's topic, redecorating the living room, new curtains, a statement wall, maybe refinishing the hardwood. I've been looking at swatches all week, Carla said. I'm thinking sage green for the accent wall. Lorraine clasped her hands together. Oh, that would be beautiful. I set my fork down gently. With what budget? The table went still. Ice shifted in Aunt Ruth's glass of sweet tea. The chandelier overhead swayed slightly from the breeze through the open window. Carla looked at me the way you look at a household appliance that just made an unexpected noise. Don't worry about it. Not everything requires a spreadsheet, Dana. Gail laughed, a small social laugh. The kind that says, I don't know what's going on, but I'll follow the cue. Carla continued, emboldened. You know what your problem is? You think because you write checks, you run things. She took a sip of wine. You don't run anything, Dana. You're the help. The word landed on the table like a plate dropped from height. The help! I looked at my mother. Lorraine's eyes flicked down to her plate. She reached for her napkin. She said nothing. That was the moment, not Carla's cruelty. I'd grown calluses over that years ago. It was my mother's silence. The way she chose the napkin over her daughter. The way she folded it in her lap and smoothed the crease as if the most important thing in the room was linen. I'd been waiting for my mother to see me for 5 years. In that silence, I understood she'd been seeing me the whole time. She just hadn't considered the view worth mentioning. Aunt Ruth shifted in her chair. Diane stared at her plate. Nobody spoke. I picked up my fork and kept eating. Not because I was hungry, because I wasn't done yet. It happened during dessert. I stood up to refill my water from the kitchen. When I came back, my seat was gone. Not the chair, the space. Carla had slid a casserole dish onto my placemat and shifted the chairs to close the gap. As if my absence from the table was simply the room correcting itself. Carla, that's my seat. She didn't look up. Sit somewhere else. I need the space for the pie. There's room on the counter. Dana. Her voice dropped the way it always did when she wanted the room to understand who was in charge. Just sit somewhere else or eat on the floor. I don't care. Gail shifted uncomfortably. Diane looked at Aunt Ruth. My mother studied her dessert fork. I pulled my chair back into position calmly. No drama, just a woman reclaiming her seat at a table she paid for. Carla stood up so fast her wine glass wobbled. She grabbed the back of my chair and shoved it hard with me halfway into sitting. The chair scraped sideways across the tile and I went down. Not gracefully. My hip hit the seat edge, my hands went out, and I landed on the floor. The same tile my father laid 20 years ago, cool and unforgiving against my palms. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then Carla laughed. A short, sharp bark, the kind that says, I can't believe she actually fell. And like a match to kindling, the table followed. Gail's nervous giggle. Lorraine's stifled smile behind her napkin. Even Aunt Ruth let out a breath that was almost a chuckle before catching herself. They laughed because they had been laughing at me for years. This was just the version with sound effects. I lay on that floor and looked up at the ceiling fan spinning lazy circles above the dining room. Then I looked at my sister, who was standing over me with the satisfied expression of someone who believed she'd won something. I smiled. Enjoy this dinner, I said. It's your last free one. Carla's smile faltered. Not much. A flicker. I stood up, brushed off my pants, and pulled out my phone, opened the draft, the email I'd written and rewritten and checked and rechecked. 60 months of payments. The Venmo photograph. Patricia Holloway's name in the CC line. 1 tap sent. I picked up my bag, walked past my mother, past my aunt, past the wine and the chicken and the pie, and I opened the screen door and stepped outside. It closed behind me with a soft wooden clap. Nobody followed. I sat in my car for 2 full minutes before turning the key. My hands were trembling. Not from fear, not from doubt. Adrenaline, the kind your body releases when it realizes you've actually done the thing you've been rehearsing for weeks. The phone buzzed before I reached the end of the block. Lorraine, I let it ring. It buzzed again. Carla. And again, a number I didn't recognize. Then Lorraine a second time. Back to back. The urgency of someone who just opened an attachment they wished they hadn't. I turned the phone to silent and set it face down on the passenger seat next to the empty skillet that still smelled like my father's cornbread. I drove. The road home felt different. The same route, the same railroad crossing, the same oak tree with the buckling roots. But the weight I'd been carrying for 5 years was no longer in the car with me. My shoulders ached from where I'd been holding them, muscles unwinding from a position I hadn't known I was clenching. I pulled into my parking spot, carried the skillet upstairs and set it in the sink. I locked my apartment door. I turned on the shower. Hot, hotter than I usually allowed myself because hot water costs money and money was something I never had extra of. But tonight I did. Tonight I had $3,800 I wasn't going to send anywhere. When I stepped out, wrapped in the one good towel I owned. The phone on the counter was alive. 23 missed calls, 14 text messages. I read them all standing barefoot on the bathroom tile, steam still curling on the mirror. Carla, this is not funny. Dana, call me back right now. Carla, you can't just do this. Carla, Mom is crying. Lorraine, how could you do this to your family? Lorraine, call me please, sweetheart, we can talk about this. Gail, hey, is everything okay? Carla seems upset. And one from Aunt Ruth, separate from the group thread, private. I read the numbers, Dana, I didn't know. Call me when you're ready. I set the phone down. I brushed my teeth. I turned off the bathroom light. I got into bed at 10:14 on a Sunday night, and I slept the way you sleep after putting down something very heavy, deeply, dreamlessly, and without once reaching for the phone on the nightstand. 6 a.m. alarm Monday. I picked up the phone and counted 73 missed calls, 41 text messages, 3 voicemails. I counted them the way I count case files at the courthouse. Carefully, without emotion, because that's how you process things that matter. Voicemail 1. Lorraine recorded at 9:47 the night before, crying but the composed kind, the kind designed to be overheard. Dana, you cannot do this. Your father would be ashamed. Call me back. We can fix this. Voicemail 2. Carla, 11:15 p.m. furious. You think you can just quit? Fine, we'll figure it out without you. We always have. Voicemail 3. Carla again, 3:20, different voice entirely. The anger had burned down to ash and what was underneath was fear. Dana. I looked up what happens when a cosigner stops paying the bank. They can a long pause. Breathing. Dana, please call me back. The shift between voicemail 2 and voicemail 3 was 6 hours. In 6 hours, Carla had gone from we'll figure it out to a woman who had finally opened a search engine and typed the words she'd been ignoring for 5 years. I showered, got dressed, packed my lunch, rice and black beans, same containers, same routine. But something was different about the morning. The light through the kitchen window felt sharper. The apartment felt smaller, but in a way that felt chosen rather than forced. I drove to work, parked in my usual spot, walked through the metal detectors, nodded at the security guard, and sat down at my desk. Margaret was already there. She looked at me over her computer screen for 3 seconds, no words. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out a paper cup from the cafe on Broad Street, and slid it across the desk. You did it, she said. I nodded. Espresso, double shot, you earned it. I picked up the cup. The warmth seeped through the paper into my fingers. I lifted the lid and breathed in. Dark roast, slightly bitter with that edge of sweetness that good espresso carries. It was the first coffee I hadn't made from a reused tea bag in 5 years. I drank it slowly, tasting every sip while the morning sun came through the courthouse windows and striped the marble floor with gold. Margaret went back to her screen. I went back to mine. Case files to process, hearings to schedule, motions to log. The courthouse didn't care about my family drama. I found that comforting. Quick check-in. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't just about money. It's about what happens when you finally say enough. If this story is hitting close to home, hit that subscribe button. I share stories like this every week. Real situations, real consequences. And if you've ever been the one everyone depended on but nobody thanked, tell me about it in the comments below. Now, let me tell you what happened when Carla showed up at my workplace. Carla came to the courthouse on Tuesday. I was behind the clerk's counter processing a stack of civil motions when I heard the lobby door open with more force than necessary. I knew it was her before I looked up. The perfume reached me first, that same floral assault she'd been wearing since she moved back home. She marched up to the counter in heels that clicked like accusations on the marble floor. "You need to fix this," she said loud enough that the attorney waiting for copies at the adjacent window looked over. "Mom hasn't slept. You're tearing this family apart." I kept my voice at the same volume I used for every person who approached this counter. Professional measured the court clerk voice. "This is my workplace, Carla. Legal questions go to my attorney. Her number's in the email. Legal." Carla's voice pitched upward. "This is family, Dana. You don't bring lawyers into family." The security guard at the metal detector shifted on his feet. 2 clerks from the adjacent office had stopped typing. I could feel Margaret watching from somewhere behind me, steady and silent. "You brought lawyers into your divorce," I said. "This is no different." Carla's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "You can't just stop paying," she said, quieter now, catching the eyes on her. I have. And my attorney will explain your options. What about Mom?" I set down my pen, looked directly at my sister. Really looked at her the way I should have looked at her years ago. "I gave Mom 5 years, Carla, 60 payments. What did you give her?" She had no answer for that. None she could deliver in a public building with security cameras and strangers watching. She turned on her heel and walked out. The glass door swung closed with a pneumatic hiss. The counter went quiet. I picked up my pen and resumed processing motions. 30 seconds later, the attorney at the adjacent window cleared his throat. "Excuse me, are the Harmon filings ready?" "Shelf 3, I said, tabbed by date. The morning continued. The courthouse didn't pause for family drama. I was grateful. At noon, I found a yellow Post-it note on my desk in handwriting. I didn't recognize just 3 words. "Good for you." I folded it carefully and put it in my wallet behind my driver's license where it would stay for a long time. The call came Thursday evening at 8:43. Lorraine, I almost didn't answer, but something in the ring pattern. She let it ring 5 times before it would have gone to voicemail as if she was giving me the choice. Made me pick up. Her voice was different. No tears, not trembling, no performance. Just a woman who sounded like she'd been awake for 3 days and had finally run out of scripts. "I spoke with your attorney this morning," she said. "Patricia," she showed me the numbers. I waited $228,000. My mother said it the way people say a diagnosis, slowly testing each syllable, hoping it might sound different out loud. Yes, a long pause. I could hear her television in the background, the faint murmur of a show she probably wasn't watching. I didn't know it was that much. I thought the bank had some program. Carla said. She stopped herself. Carla said, "What?" Another pause, longer. When my mother spoke again, her voice cracked in a way I'd never heard before. Not the theatrical crack she deployed at Sunday dinners, but the real one, the one underneath. Carla told me she was helping. $300 a month, she said. Told me that 2 years ago, a pause, I believed her. Lorraine exhaled, I believed her. I closed my eyes. $300. Carla had told our mother she was contributing $300 a month. She'd never sent me a single dollar, not once. And Lorraine had believed it because believing it was easier than looking at the bank statements herself. "There was no program, Mom. I said there was me." My mother was quiet for a long time after that. Not the punishing silence of someone withholding love, the crumbling silence of someone seeing clearly for the first time and not liking the view. "What do you want me to do?" she asked finally. Small voice, no authority left in it. "Talk to Patricia. She'll walk you through the options. And us, you and me." I leaned against the kitchen counter. The apartment was dark except for the stove light. My reflection in the window looked tired and certain. "I'm not disappearing, Mom. I'm just done paying to be ignored." She said she understood. Whether she did or not, I couldn't tell. But it was the first honest conversation we'd had in 5 years, and I wasn't going to grade it. I hung up, made tea, sat in the quiet, and let the truth settle the way dust settles after you finally move the furniture. 2 weeks passed. Lorraine met with Patricia, who laid everything out in plain language. Refinance the mortgage without Dana or sell the house and divide the equity. Lorraine applied for refinancing on her own. She was denied within a week. Income too low, credit too thin. Nobody was surprised, least of all Patricia. The house went on the market on a Tuesday in June. Patricia negotiated Dana's equitable share, roughly $87,000, based on her contribution relative to total equity. Carla had to move out. The word temporary finally came true 4 years late. She found an apartment across town, small, beige, no wraparound porch. The tenant in my old room, T. Ramos, was given 30 days' notice and left without incident. Neil's attorney received the Venmo documentation. A family court hearing was scheduled to review Carla's child support modification, declaring zero income while collecting $600 a month in rent. That's the kind of arithmetic judges notice. Aunt Ruth called me on a Wednesday, no small talk. I should have said something years ago. I watched it happen. Told myself it wasn't my place. She paused. It was my place. I'm sorry. Thank you, Ruth. Your father worried about you, not Carla. He said you'd carry everything and never set it down. Another pause. He was right. And I should have helped you put it down sooner. I thanked her again and meant it more the second time. Margaret bought me coffee every morning that week. I told her she didn't need to. I know, she said. You spent 5 years paying for everyone. Let someone buy you a latte. I let her. I drove past the house on a Thursday after work. The for sale sign stood in the front yard, white with blue lettering, tilted slightly from the wind. The porch looked the same. The lawn needed mowing. Nobody had touched it since the listing went live. I slowed down but didn't stop. I read the asking price on the sign and did quiet math. I had paid more than that in monthly installments. 5 years of rice and beans and data entry and reused tea bags, and the total exceeded the number on a sign that my mother would see every time she opened the front door. I drove on. The house shrank in my rearview mirror. The road ahead was open. The sale closed in August. Quick as these things go, a young couple with a toddler and a golden retriever, the kind of family real estate agents put in brochures. They loved the porch. They loved the yard. They didn't know anything about the people who'd lived there, and they didn't need to. Lorraine took her share off the equity and rented a 2-bedroom apartment near Aunt Ruth. Smaller, quieter. She had enough to live comfortably if she was careful. And for the first time in years, she had a reason to be careful because nobody else was covering the difference. My credit score dropped 42 points from the missed payment that hit during the sale process. I'd expected it. 42 points for 5 years of freedom. I would have paid more. I used my $87,000 as a down payment on a condo 12 minutes from the courthouse. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with an actual dishwasher, and a window that faced the marsh instead of a parking garage. The first night, I stood at that window and watched the sun set over the Spartina grass, and I stood there until the sky went purple and the frogs started up. The first Sunday in the new place, I baked cornbread, my father's recipe. Same buttermilk, same honey, same cast iron skillet. The only kitchen item I'd kept from my old life. The condo smelled like his kitchen. I set the table, 1 plate, 1 glass, 1 napkin. I sat down and ate slowly, and nobody told me where to sit, and nobody laughed, and nobody called me the help. My mother called that afternoon. Not every Sunday, but some Sundays. Her voice on the phone was different now, smaller, more careful with words, the way people get when they realize language has weight. We talked about the weather, about Ruth, about nothing important. It was enough. Carla didn't call. Not that week, not the next. I didn't expect her to. Forgiveness might come eventually or it might not. Some doors don't reopen on a schedule, and I'd made peace with that. I bought coffee from the cafe on Broad Street every morning. Espresso, double shot, $4.50. A luxury I denied myself for half a decade that now felt less like indulgence and more like basic respect. Marat came over for dinner on Fridays. I made enough for 2. That brings us back to where we started. Last Sunday, my sister shoved me off a chair and the whole table laughed. I I tapped a button in my phone and walked out of a house I'd kept standing for 5 years with nothing but stubbornness and a paycheck that was never big enough. 73 missed calls by morning, a demand letter by Monday, a 4L sign by June, a condo with a marsh view by August. People ask me if I regret it. I don't. Not the email, not the lawyer, not the 42 credit points I'll earn back in 18 months. The only thing I regret is waiting 5 years to stand up from a floor I'd been lying on metaphorically since the day I signed that co-signer agreement in an office that smelled like cold coffee. My mother and I are rebuilding something. It's slower than before and more honest. She doesn't cry to win arguments anymore. Or if she does, she catches herself midway and stops. That's progress. It's small and imperfect, and it's ours. Carla remains a silence on the other end of a phone that doesn't ring. I've stopped interpreting that silence. It's not my job anymore. Last Friday, Margaret came over for dinner. It made pot roast. Not my mother's recipe, my own. Margaret brought wine. We ate at my kitchen table, which seats 4 but only needed 2. You ever miss the Sunday dinners? She asked. I thought about it. The pot roast, the clock ticking, the draft on my ankles, Carla at the head of the table, the cold tile on my palms. I miss my father's chair, I said. I don't miss the seating chart. Margaret raised her glass. I raised mine. We didn't toast to anything. We just drank. After she left, I washed the dishes, wiped the counter, and stood at the window. The marsh was dark, the moon a half circle above the waterline, and a mockingbird was singing from the magnolia outside. The same species that lived in the crepe myrtle behind the courthouse, singing the same song it always sang. Some things follow you, the good ones, you let them. I turned off the kitchen light, put the leftover cornbread in the fridge, went to bed early, 1 chair, 1 plate, 1 life that was finally completely mine. That's Dana's story. Or maybe in some way it's yours too. If you've ever been the one holding everything together while everyone around you took it for granted, I see you. And I hope you know that stopping isn't selfish. It's survival. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. There are more stories in the description. Women who decided enough was enough and did something about it. Drop a comment and tell me yours. I read every single one. Thank you for listening. Truly, I'll see you in the next one.